Welcome to the Z Spot.
Hey. I'm Zuri Pryor-Graves, sex therapist, intimacy coordinator, sexologist, and your go-to for all things love, lust, and everything in between. Every other Tuesday, you're invited to come a little closer to where real conversations press against your heart, linger in your mind, and tingle through your body. I'm bringing you guests who keep it honest with just the right hint of spicy. From experts to exes, artists to activists, and lovers to legends. So, thanks for choosing you and swiping right on me. Now settle in, because it's time for us to hit the spot. Hey, I'm your host, Zuri Pryor-Graves of Intimacy with Z, and this is the Z Spot, the podcast for the curious, the courageous, and the unapologetically authentic. We're talking intimacy, reclaiming self, and centering all of the sexy, sticky, soulful stories that matter. So welcome to the girls, the gays, the theys, and anyone bold enough to ask the questions we weren't supposed to growing up and speak the truths we're finally ready to live. And today on the Z Spot, we're leaning into something rich, radical, and necessary. Pleasure as power and poetry as a tool for liberation. Our guest work reminds us that sexual freedom and artistic expression are not luxuries. They're our birthrights. But for so many of us, pleasure has been politicized, policed, or simply pushed out of reach by systems that were never designed for us or for our joy. That's why today's conversation is all about systems and how they shape who gets to be free, who gets to feel free, who gets to be safe, who gets to feel safe, and who overall just gets to feel good. We're asking, what is pleasure equality? What does it mean to actually dismantle barriers between you and your joy? And how can art, especially poetry, guide us back to our own erotic truths? To walk us through it all is someone whose voice is as powerful on the page as it is behind a podium. Dr. Misha is a certified sexologist, published poet, professor, public speaker, and my soror of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She's the founder of Misha's Room, a creative and educational space rooted in reflection, healing, and sexual liberation. What started as a podcast unpacking her own poetry and lived experience as a Southern Black queer cisgender woman has evolved into a vibrant ecosystem of coaching, workshops, and trainings, all of which are grounded in dismantling oppressive norms and affirming pleasure as a right. She is also the co-founder of the Queer Wellness Network, which is a nonprofit increasing access to sexual and mental health resources for specifically BIPOC and LGBTQ plus folks. She is also a proud New Orleans native and a dog mom. Dr. Misha brings softness and strength to every room that she's in. So today we're talking about her journey to becoming Dr. Misha and how pleasure and protest intersect. So I'm really excited today to welcome to the Z Spot, Dr. Misha. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm just really grateful that you're here because I think in a lot of my work, I talk about pleasure in such a rigid way. And I think that just being the sex educator in the lane that I'm in, I don't think about it as much as political or, and I also don't think of it as fluffy and indulgent, but it's all of these things, right? Pleasure is a spectrum. So I'm just grateful to have you here so we can talk about it from a different lens and really get into the truth of what pleasure is and how it operates in different systems. So, Dr. Misha, I know that we are in a really kind of funky stage right now in the world in general, especially in America, in politics, like as Black people, as Black women, as queer people, as queer Black people, all of it, and literally just existing in this country right now. And I know that we talk about pleasure as like I said, is like it's this separate thing, and a lot of times it's grounded in sex and sexuality. But what I like about your work is you talk a lot about pleasure existing in oppressive systems. And I think this is like the perfect time for us to figure out a way to kind of bring that out. So can you tell us a little bit about your work in that space?
So
I often say that in Misha's room, I support individuals in purposely pursuing pleasure as an act of resistance. And so
Okay.
folks will sit back and say, like, how? Like,
Mhm.
masturbate, my orgasms is gonna, like, how is that gonna make society a better place? In many ways, though, like,
Right.
you go to work with a smile. But in addition to that, society has been structured with the system of white supremacy, and the
Mhm.
system tends to intentionally oppress individuals and create structures that force us to avoid or not have time to prioritize our own individual pleasures or experiencing that or discovering what does or doesn't work for us. And so I think in Misha's room, one of the goals that I try to meet is to help people see how showing up and occupying space as the most authentic version of yourself does challenge these systems and push back against a structure that was designed for, and like I tend to use myself as an example,
Mhm.
it was designed for white, cisgender, heterosexual, middle class men. And me simply existing
Right.
as a black Southern lesbian from New Orleans that, like, with my natural hair and going occupying
Yes.
space, my nails, I do my thing.
Mhm.
That does push back against what people believe someone in my position should look like or how they should occupy space. I love going into places demanding people call me Dr. Misha, but still go
Right.
and I have my nails done. I like pull up in the office, bump and start this shit off right by Wheezy. Like, and I go and occupy space in my fullness. And by
Mhm.
doing that, I find pleasure in being my full self in those spaces. And then those spaces that were designed for people that aren't like me
Absolutely.
have to think a little bit more about how now you have to make space for me because I'm occupying that.
I love that. And I also hear, like, I feel like we think about pleasure, again, I keep saying the same thing, but a lot of times people do think about it as super one-dimensional. And I think the way that you're using the word pleasure, it goes beyond, like you mentioned, masturbating, yes, but also in other ways. So how do you define pleasure?
So, like you mentioned, there is that one dimensional. Folks will think pleasure and it's automatically to this like demonized experience of sex, which, like, come on now. People got here in different ways, but sex isn't that bad. And so, one of the ways that I try to define pleasure is to look at the multiple dimensions that exist within it. There is sexual pleasure, that is a component.
Right.
There's also like physical pleasure. There's like pleasure from being in company. There's pleasure that's layered. And so I try to look at those different segments and those different ways of defining pleasure. Like, I remember when I was in high school, there was this girl that used to make me brownies. She was a cheerleader. I was an athlete.
Let's
Anyway,
go.
so she would make brownies, and I remember eating those brownies, and it tastes like orgasmic. I refer to them as orgasmic brownies.
Yeah.
But it was like the pleasure that I felt from eating this sweet, delicious treat just felt so good. And so that's a component of pleasure that you can get from food, you can
Right.
get from relationships, you can get from connection, and you can get from the intimate act of sex. And so I think when we consider pleasure, we just have to think about it as the broader concept opposed to just like sexual pleasure and like the bodily response in that way.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering, like, when people do come to you and meet with you in Misha's room, what are some of the things that you find that people are coming with where they're not able to access that pleasure or see that within themselves?
So one, education
Mm.
has caused folks to have very rigid or sometimes one-dimensional views and perspectives about sex and sexuality.
Yes.
It's become something that's shamed and we don't talk about it. And then when we do talk about it, we have to come from this place as if like, I know, like I'm good, I got
Right.
it. Like I don't need support. I don't have to ask any questions because I have
Mhm.
this understanding already. When we enter Misha's room and I start to ask questions and I use my poetry as ways to explore, like, well, how do we start talking about these types of things in
Right.
connections in the relationships? Or how were your sexual experiences with people? Is it different? I know you've had different experiences as the people have changed in the encounters that you've had. And so we'll have those kind of conversations. We'll talk about like stuff that's out there. Like sometimes I introduce BDSM and kink to folks who are typically used to just vanilla sex. And it's like, well, have you ever called your partner daddy? Do you like, come on, have you ever
Right.
like enjoyed getting your ass smacked? That's a little taste of impact play. Maybe let's start to kind of release some of the constraints that we put around what sex could look like and what's supposed to be demonized as bad sex or what aspects of pleasure aren't things that we're supposed to explore. and then learn a little bit more about it. If it's for you, it's for you. And if it's not for you, then it's not. But ultimately, we want to be a little bit more open and
Right.
educated and informed about what
Mhm.
things are. And so I hope that people come to Misha's room and get those types of experiences.
I love that. And I think that what you're talking about in terms of like education, a lot of that, like you're there to teach people, but it sounds like you're also there to help people unlearn. Because we are having to, like, that goes into the dismantling systems of oppression. We have to first dismantle those systems that we've built within ourselves.
Exactly.
Unlearn some of those behaviors, unlearn some of those things so we can make space and room for, it sounds like, what amazing and beautiful things could come out of being in a pleasure-centered space.
Exactly.
So I think that that's really beautiful. I also, in what you were hearing, I feel like we don't talk enough about ego and pleasure and how disruptive ego can be to pleasure. Is that something that you think of or feel or could speak on?
Definitely. Ego is a huge thing. And I sit back and I wonder, how could we possibly believe that like there aren't things to learn or there aren't things to explore, or we all can get a little bit better? You know, I always heard that, you can always be better at things. And so I think ego comes into play because society has shamed conversations about sex and sexuality, and as a culture and community. If you hear a story about somebody that wasn't that good, then like you automatically kind of feel like, oh, well, one, I won't give them a chance. And two, I feel bad for them. Like you shouldn't give them another chance. And so there's this sense of shame. I think that we kind of stray away from learning and asking questions and communicating kind of openly and honestly with one another, because there's this sense of, I need to be good at this, because if I'm not good, then maybe I won't get none. Or if people are talking about me the way that I've heard people talking about other people that aren't as good, or that have questions, or that want to talk about sex a little bit more in depth, I think if we are able to take that and sit it aside and realize that just because we're learning more or exploring different things in sexual pleasure, or because different partners desire different things in order for them to feel and experience pleasure in these ways, if we're able to set that aside and not realize or not read it as, oh, I'm less than, or I'm not as good as, or I'm bad, and just read it as like, this is another tool to go in my toy box.
Right,
Or something
exactly.
like, this is another toy to go in my toy box for me to pull out and utilize at times. I think that can help us kind of dismantle ego a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I think that, like, something I'm hearing you say, something I get very annoyed with, like when people are talking about pleasure, they're like, well, I know it works. That whole idea of like, I found something that works, so I'm just going to go do that thing. And it's like, works for who? And what does works mean exactly? Like, also, if you're so stuck on that, like, what are you bringing your full self to partnered experiences, or are you just bringing that one tool?
I'm wondering, are you holding space for the people you're engaging with to be able to bring themselves, or to be able to seek pleasure in this way, even demand or require it? Because I know I've had experiences with different types of people across the planet, and those experiences have been different because of the individuals. Some people like this a little faster, some people like a little slower. And if we aren't being intentional or being open to receiving that feedback and then learning how to do something a little bit different, then, it doesn't necessarily create the same experience for all parties. It doesn't necessarily create a pleasurable space for everyone.
Absolutely. And fine, I can already feel it that I'm about to go down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to reel it back in, but I do have one question. Something that comes up for me a lot in these conversations is, how do you have that conversation? So I wonder, when people are coming to Misha's room, they're learning about themselves and things, but they're also potentially awakening things that they didn't know that they might want, and they might already be involved with someone, and they already might have a sexual relationship with someone. And now it's time to broach that conversation. People are always like, well, I couldn't say it during, or like, I don't know how to bring that up, or like whatever. So how would you suggest that people kind of broach those conversations about sex with partners?
This reminds me of I was hosting an event and this exact question came up, and it was
Mhm.
like, so how am I supposed to tell my partner that now I want them to tie me up and drag me across the room? So I think that first off, making sure that you have a comfortable and safe relationship with your partner, um, offer reassurance and letting folks know that just because this is a thing that I'm like potentially interested in, it's not my way of saying that I don't enjoy the experiences we have or that there's a deficit that you have in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
I encourage people to approach it as creative play because sex is playful, sex is fun, or it's supposed to be in some ways. And so I encourage folks to maybe like say, hey, let's explore this thing and see how it works. Like, for example, if you decide to try to integrate shibari or some form of like rope play in it, maybe we sit down and laugh about the knots that we don't know how to tie, or we figure out how to play in those ways, safe, of course. Like, there's dangers in some of those things. So make sure
Be careful.
make sure you learn and you practice.
Right.
But being able to integrate it in a creative way that's kind of like playful can help sometimes. Also asking your partner, like, what are they interested in? Or talk about fantasies a little bit. Or if there were no restrictions in this place where no one would ever know and there were never any questions,
Right.
what would you do? How could you, or what did you imagine would be like the way of experiencing your greatest degree of pleasure, sexual pleasure, if that's the lane y'all want to play in? But kind of make sure you have an open space, you create a reassuring environment for the people or the person that you're communicating with, and then, enter it from a space of play. It's not a deficit. This isn't something that we can't ever do. I'm not saying that y'all need to go and buy a table or try to get you a St. Andrew's cross and try to like go just balls to wall in those ways.
Right.
But I do encourage you to maybe start introducing some things. Maybe go to classes. Maybe reach out to me and see what we can find. Maybe start to have a little bit more of those conversations around what types of pleasurable experiences you may desire and how y'all can achieve those together. I also encourage pleasure mapping as like an activity that y'all can do together just to see how folks tend to respond to different sensations and different components of
Can
the
you
body.
explain what pleasure mapping is
So,
for folks?
in short, this is like a really, really short, like quick summary of pleasure mapping. But it's a way that you can trace your body, you and a partner, or you can do it independently. I like to do it physically, but you could also do it on paper if you are uncomfortable touching certain parts, or if you and your partner are uncomfortable touching certain parts. And it's kind of like identifying what places are like your goes, what places are your nose, and what sensations you like in those spaces. Like some folks say, I don't like to be spanked or I don't like to be hit. I'm okay with an open hand spank on my butt, not necessarily on, I was going to say my face, but I don't know, man. That depends on the day. But some folks are not okay with that. And so it's not to say that open hands, slaps or contact isn't something that you can engage in. It's just something that can only be done in this particular part on this particular section of the body. Same thing for like taps or scratches or bites or kisses. And then you can kind of explore the different sensations across the different components or parts of your body. I like to do it with a partner, maybe integrating body paint or like foods. If you don't want to get body paint, peanut butter, you can eat that off. Chocolate, all of those different things are places you can put on the body. Peanut butters, yes. I don't know, jellies, no, type of thing.
Oh, so actual physical mapping. I thought you were meaning like
you could do the physical mapping
like
on your body.
Yeah. But
if you want to go that far. Okay. There are levels and layers to this. You can use a sheet of paper with like just a body that's there, and it's like this the front of the body, this is the back. Use a marker,
I think that's what
and you can write in those ways. But if you want to go a little bit further, get a little creative with your partner, then you could go in, do yours independently, or if you trust your partner to do your yes places in those ways, you can do that.
Yeah, and I think that just if people are interested in doing that more, other than going to see Misha, going to see Dr. Misha, something that came up in Sex, Love, and Goop, which is, I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a documentary on Netflix. There are some really great parts of that documentary. There are some that are not so much. But one of the things that they did, and I don't think they named it as such, is they did some pleasure mapping around sensation. So what that looked like is very similar to what you're saying. Had someone lay out and had a bunch of different things. Some of them were temperature controlled.
Yeah.
Some of them were impact play toys. Some of them were sensation things like a feather or what have you. And rubbing and just taking the time to use those different pieces of things on different parts of the body. And if something makes you feel tickled, tickling is actually a fetish, but for me, if you tickle me, it's taking me out of the moment. I will giggle, I will laugh, I no longer feel horny, so don't tickle me. But for some, you never know, and you're like, unless you've tried it and you've given yourself the opportunity, maybe I haven't given, if I was tickled in a very particular place in a very particular way, it might get a yes. But until you take the time to map that out, and figure that out. So I think that is maybe a real place that people can go and kind of see that. It's probably like, I don't know, like episode 3-ish. And you can do that, like you said, with your partner or with there's certain points of your body that you're never going to be able to touch or experience. And there's what you can do, and the sensations that you're creating in your own body are going to send different neurological pathways to create different sensations. So when somebody else does it, it's not going to feel the same as when you do it.
Yeah.
But all in all of that is finding your own way to pleasure and pleasure expression and all of that. And I know something that really I was taken by in meeting you before I knew you were going to be on this panel was you're a poet, and I think that it's amazing that to be able to find this pleasure outlet for yourself that doesn't have to be physical, or it could be incorporated in your physical. So I just could you talk a little bit about your journey to becoming a poet and how those things kind of are interconnected?
So I have been a writer pretty much all my life. I still have all my journals from like 5th grade to this day. 5th grade all the way through graduation and stuff. And I used to write poetry and I would share them here and there. And then by college, I started to perform. My line sister actually signed me up without me knowing. And so then I started to share my poetry in those ways. And it was really exciting because folks started to connect it with it. I remember my freshman year, I was like dating this girl and like we were laying in my bed and like I wanted some and she was asleep. So I couldn't get none. And so then I like sat up and I started writing. And that was when I wrote like my very first sex poem. And like in that poem, I found this freedom that I didn't realize poetry had space for because I was writing poetry already. Like I would write about, like I wrote about liking a girl. I wrote about like me thinking I'm going to hell and stuff like that. But, processing trauma through poetry. And so I used it for that outlet, but I didn't think about, or I don't know, I just hadn't considered using poetry as this place for me to be able to explore sexuality in a way. And so when I sat there and I wrote that first sex poem and when I was done, I was like, oh, this is hot shit. And I felt better about it. Still didn't get none that night, but the poem was great. And then I went on to share with other folks and people started connecting. And then I found this whole poetry community that like centered sexuality and pleasure and eroticism. And it was beautiful to be able to let those parts of me kind of have their own space. So,
I love that.
It was cool.
I love that. Okay, so I feel like I heard everything you said, but I am still stuck on this poem, especially if it's, it seems like such a pivotal point in your journey of pleasure and your journey of yourself and all of that. I would be so curious to know if you know said poem, or like, do you remember it, or did you write it? I know that we're going to get to you are a published author as well, so we'll get to that, but is it in any of your books, or is it something that you remember?
I could see if I could pull it off the dome, but I do have it.
Hey!
And it's in Silver Games. It is in one of my books.
It is in Silver Games, and you said that was your first book.
Yes, Silver Games is my first collection of poetry.
But you really do have this poem.
I really do have this poem.
I feel like we are in for a treat.
Okay.
And about how old were you when you wrote this?
Oh, I may have been 19, 20-ish.
Wow.
Yeah, somewhere around there, I think. Maybe.
Okay, if you can pull that off the dome, I feel like this is going to be a very impactful situation.
Let's see. Oh, it's so funny. It's called Wet Spot.
It's called Wet Spot?
It is called Wet Spot.
Okay. Wet Spot means Z spot.
Here we are. Okay. I want you to fuck me. Touch me in places that the sun don't shine. Let our juices intertwine. I want your lips on mine, but not the kind that speaks. I want the kind that skeets, creating silk sheets, and we argue over who's going to sleep in the wet spot. Let's Keep going till the neighbors tell us stop. Fuck the blankets, it got too hot. I'm lost in you. Drowning in this sea of unforgiveness. I miss this shit. Girl, the things your sweet pleasantries can do. Got me ready to say I love you when we both know that's a lie. I just love how high you take me. How much you say you hate me, and moments later moan my name. We're one and the same, so much that I can't tell when my body stops and yours begins. We know we're more than just friends. I guess it depends on the color of your mood ring. Which strap did you bring? Because I'm ready to ride. I promise. Sierra ain't got shit on me. Lay back lay back that front seat and let this 5'9" frame go to work. I put these legs in places you swear that it hurts, but I love it. I almost can't get enough. I like it rough, but I want you to tease me. Please me. Spell your name out on my clit. Now suck it.
Oh my goodness.
My insides have given your tongue a new home. No more suppressed moans. I let go, letting you know that it's a job well done. Forget one, give me 2, 3, 4, back to back. So good that I ignore the fact that I'm sleeping in the wet spot.
Okay. I feel like this is the right thing that I'm supposed to do. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to gather myself. So, wow.
Goodness, I stumbled a bit. It's been a while, but
Oh
you know,
gosh.
that is
I know
wet
you were
spot.
looking for your phone and everything. No, you had that off cover. That is amazing.
Thank you.
And my face hurts from blushing, but it'll be fine. Okay. No, that I feel like that, I mean, yes, that is an amazing poem, but also it is a clear expression of, you know, your pleasure, where you were in that moment and all of that. At Misha's room, do you work with folks to find other ways so that they can express themselves in pleasure? Like, do people write poetry or really?
So we'll write poetry sometimes. I'll use my poetry as kind of like prompts to facilitate dialogues in Misha's room. So like there's this poem that's called Best of Both Worlds. I wrote it for the show I did in New Orleans called Sex versus Love.
Mm-hmm.
And in the poem, I talk about basically a threesome. Now, it's not necessarily my experience. All my poems are not my experiences. But in in the poem, I talk about what this experience would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had workshops where I've said that poem, I performed it, and then I present the question of, you know, how do we talk about exploring sexuality in these ways? How do you discuss if you want to have a threesome? Have you had a threesome? What goes into that? What different positions does it happen? And, you know, what does it mean if you have partners of this gender and partners of that gender? What if we integrate them in these different ways? And it goes into conversations about possibility.
Okay, so you get everybody hot and bothered, and then you ask them to be academic and like, and I can't.
Yes.
Yes, I'm already having a hard time catching back up to this conversation because that was a lot. No, but that's amazing.
It's fun. It gets really, really fun.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people in the crowds, it's a very, very interactive experience. So folks will like get the mic and ask questions and somebody want to answer that question. And so then we end up facilitating a dialogue in the space around these different topics that were centered or rooted in the creative expression from the poems.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
Thank you.
I would have never thought to do something like that. Is that something that you are still actively doing?
Yeah, it's something I'm still actively doing. I took a pause for a bit because I was like, you know, I want to get this degree. So I finished my PhD.
Shout outs to being Dr. Misha.
Thank you. So once I finished that, I was like, okay, now I'm ready to relaunch Misha's Room in this more intentional way, or the workshops that I've been hosting in Misha's Room in this more intentional way. Now, from 2020 to maybe like 2023-ish, I was hosting workshops in New Orleans. I was doing them in like Dallas a little bit. I did virtual workshops throughout the pandemic where we had real in-depth conversations.
Right.
I remember one was, it was a virtual workshops I did. It was called Headhunters Academy Oral 101.
Yes.
And we talked about anatomy and physiology. So we actually learned the real names of the vulva and those parts in that way.
Yeah.
But we also learned about pleasure points. So we learned about different ways you can perform oral sex to partners that have these different body parts. And it became this real educational experience that was also centered around a poem that I wrote called Curiosity that talks about oral sex and stuff like that. And so it was a fun experience to do that. And I like to create those types of spaces for folks to be able to do it. So I foresee me doing some more virtual things, but I also am excited to bring some of those in-person workshops, even if it's the pop-ups or my cohorts.
Okay. Okay. And I also, now you have mentioned 2 poems, and I'm over here like, okay, so how do I get to hear these? But I don't know if I can handle it. But it does provide a good segue to, I would like to know more about your books, and I know that you have 3 here with you.
I do.
And yeah, so could you tell us a little bit more about that? And also, where can I find that Wet Spot one again?
So, Silver Games is my first collection of poetry. I published this one, I think, in 2017. It was one of those, like, people had heard my poetry, but I would perform and then hate to share it again because I'm like, I don't want to keep doing these pieces.
Got it.
And people were like, I want to hear that. I missed that one. And so I said, I guess I can see what I can do. And so I put them together in Silver Games. This was me really like putting myself out there in this real creative and intentional way. I love this piece. It's like I'll sometimes go through this and I'm like, oh yeah, she's still that young girl that I was. I think she'd be really, really proud of the woman that I've grown into now. Scattered Showers. Scattered Showers is my second collection of poetry. This one I published in 2019. And the title Scattered Showers comes from, I'm from New Orleans, and like it'll be raining on one side of the city, and then like you just drive and then it's not raining anymore. Or there are spots where you can sit and it's like you can see the rain on one side and then not. And so it's kind of like these scattered showers exist and it can be pouring down. And you may sit there and think that like I'm in this scattered shower and it's raining so hard and there's like nothing I can do about it. But if you keep driving through the scattered shower, you get on the other side where it is sunshine and kind of like rainbows, whatever. You just kind of keep working through the scattered showers. And that's where the title came from. And at this point, I felt like I was driving through a lot of scattered showers. And a lot of the pieces in this one kind of connects to that.
Yes.
And so Scattered Showers was a nice transformational period of my life.
I love that. And I really thought it was going to be about something else when I see Scattered Showers and I'm talking to you. So I was like, okay.
There are quite a few sex poems in that one too.
Okay.
Like, so all of them have sex poems integrated throughout. And this is my last one, or my most recent collection. It's called Maintaining Homeostasis. And it was all about like maintaining balance. I went through a lot of transition in life. My grandmother passed away at the time, and I wrote a lot of poetry and stuff to kind of process and gather through that, or to accept that, and through that grief in general. And so I was trying to maintain balance. I wanted to maintain homeostasis in some ways. And so those pieces kind of came together for this collection. And so, yeah. Those are the 3 pieces. You can find them. They're on like Amazon. You can find them on mishasroom.com. And go on the cart and you can get them. But yeah, those are my babies.
I love that. That sounds like. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing these books. And it sounds like, I mean, there was a lot of resonant things for me, especially in the pleasure and the sex world. But even more than that, and when you were talking about grief, and I don't necessarily want to get too deeply into the grief, but what that means to me and what I'm hearing is you use poetry as a means to process. And I know just thinking about the political climate that we're in right now and all of that, is that something that you feel like you're able to use to kind of process that? Are you using your art and your poetry to work through these oppressive systems and times that we're living in?
Definitely have. I have written quite a few poems like in pivotal moments that have happened these past few years. I'll just say these past 5 years to be specific. Like I've written this one poem, it's called Skydiving. And that was right around like, I think I wrote it in like May of 2020. And that one talked a lot about Breonna Taylor's murder and things of that nature, or my response to and the public's response to it. And it was a real safe space for me to put my grief and my frustration. It's like, oh, I was so frustrated.
Right.
I wrote poems then. I wrote poems when Roe versus Wade got overturned. And I just was navigating this predominantly white space and having to have uncomfortable conversations. And then next thing you know, Roe versus Wade gets overturned. And it's like, okay, this has this impact. I wrote a poem when we got the results of this presidential election. And that poem was like, that one was interesting because it does talk a lot about sexuality, or it does have this like sexuality component in it. Or like imagery kind of in the poem
Okay.
while it's expressing frustration.
I feel like I want you to paint that picture for me. I don't know. Do you have another poem in you?
I have that one if you like to hear it. I could do that.
Okay, but where I feel like I interrupted you. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's okay. I was saying that I have a couple experiences where I like turn directly to poetry to like
Okay.
process what was going on. Like I would sit down and I would ask myself, like, all right, where your head at? Like what's on our mind at this moment? Like what we feeling? Like do that little
Mhm.
check-in with myself. And then that would often turn into like some of the first lines of the poems. Like
Mm.
Wet Spot, for example. I was like, where are you? I want you to fuck me. And that's how that poem became. And same
Yeah.
thing happens even for navigating a lot of the moments we are experiencing currently in society.
Okay. I love that. I feel like I need another expressive outlet. This is becoming one, but I think it's important for everybody to find that level of intentionality in the way that they live so they are not just holding on to all of those things themselves, whether they release them in pleasure or orgasm or on a paper. I think both are important. But yeah, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have another poem in you. But I was very taken by that one, and I would love it if you do have it or if
Yeah,
you're willing
I have
to.
that one. I don't
Okay, because it's definitely probably extremely relevant right now.
Yeah, this one it's kind of shortish, but it is also it's so vulgar.
Okay, I'm here for vulgar. I'm here for that.
I didn't title it, but like I said, I started off by asking myself, like, where are you? How are you feeling in this moment? And my response was, I am so sick of people playing in our faces, hating Black women while arguing against racism. You can't expect my forgiveness when the numbers don't lie, but I guess it's all good as long as you get your slice of the pie, as long as your friends don't die, as long as your kids ain't asking why. Mommy say shut up when usually we keep speaking, forcing us to contradict ourselves so our hearts keep beating. Because Lord knows if we say something, we end up leaking. Another hashtag, reason social media is peaking. Until niggas move on. But my niggas still gone, and I gotta keep going even when America is fucking me from the left and right. Dropping dick that I don't even like, ain't using no lube, saying shit so rude, and I never mentioned having a degradation kink. I barely consented to this link, yet here we are, forcefully fucking, raw. There's nothing. Nobody's coming. The consequences are disgusting, and not in a good way. This is far from my kind of play. I don't even know what to say other than I'm being fucked in a way that I don't like by cis men and white women, and they ain't never been my type.
That one, I'm here. I'm yes.
Yeah.
That is a very loud poem.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
I feel like we need that on a t-shirt.
They ain't never been my type.
Right. Ain't never been my type. Like, no, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I hate that we're in this space because I feel like we are running out of time. And this is going to end up being a theme, I think, of this entire podcast that I don't ever get to the questions on my sheet. No, but I'm so taken with you. And I think that even being able to have this conversation and using art as a tool of empowerment and a journey to pleasure is so important, and also something so different than what I heard you speak on the panel about. Yes. It just lets me know that you have to come back and it also, you were just, I feel like we all need a lesson on how to get better head, and for people who want to have conversations about explicitly about sex and behavior and potentially like threesomes or whatever that looks like. I don't think that there are enough spaces where those conversations can happen really candidly, and people can get actually digestible information, and just help along the way as they try to process those things.
Yeah.
So we definitely, if you're willing, have to have you back and really delve into some of those things.
I'm definitely open to that. I love it. It's been beautiful here being at the Z Spot.
Thank you. But until then, is there anything that you would like our listeners to know? And if you could please tell people how to find you.
I want everyone to know that it is important for you to purposely pursue pleasure as an act of resistance Rather that is ignoring that phone call and taking a walk, or, not responding to that email in the moment, or deciding to lay in your bed a little bit longer to masturbate because that's what you want right now. And then go handle the thing. Demand your time. Purposely pursue pleasure as an act of resistance. And if you want other suggestions, recommendations, or ideas around how to do that, or want to hear some poetry, or just have more conversations about sexuality in general, you can find me on Instagram at mishas.room. That's MISHAS.room, ROOM. Or you can find me at www.mishasroom.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Truly. I can't wait. I don't know the last time I bought a book of poems. And I think that I'm forgetting how I feel like powerful poetry can be. And I feel like my bodily response and reaction today reminded me, okay, all right, it's a small way to make a huge, like a short way instead of like reading an entire book.
Yeah.
But in those moments to really make a powerful impact. So I appreciate that. And thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Again, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like that, we've reached the end of today's episode. And if nobody's told you today, you are worthy of pleasure, connection, curiosity, and care. Thank you again so much to my guest, Dr. Misha, for showing up with honesty and heart. And thank you for listening and staying with us. If this episode touched something in you, please share it with someone who needs it. Follow me at Intimacy with Z, follow the podcast, leave a review, or just whisper about it in your next pillow talk. Until next time, this has been The Z Spot. The Z Spot would like to thank our water sponsor, Zini Water. It's based right here in Atlanta. Zini is the first and only Black-owned alkaline bottled water company in the United States. Their Zini Gold and Silver waters are pH balanced, purified, and packed with electrolytes and minerals that hydrate your body the right way. And here's the best part. For 10% off your order at ziniwaters.com, just use the promo code TheZSpot so you can taste the difference for yourself. Support a Black-owned business, hydrate better, and feel good about what's in your glass. That's Zini Water. Today on the Z Spot, I poured a glass of the 2022 Theopatra's Cuvée Blanc from Theopolis Vineyards. This one is bright and tropical, opening with fresh pineapple, honeysuckle, and chamomile on the nose. On the palate, you get honeydew and cantaloupe layered with smooth spice, mouth-watering acidity, and a long, creamy finish. Theopolis Vineyards is the creation of Theodora Lee, also known as Theopatra, Queen of the Vineyards, a Black woman-owned winemaker and trailblazer who turned her passion into an award-winning, internationally recognized brand. Every bottle celebrates excellence, heritage, and community. If you'd like to taste this selection or any of the other incredible wines, head over to theopolisvineyards.com and use the code TheZSpot for 10% off your order. And let me know if you love it as much as I did. Thank you for supporting Black women-owned business. Today, I'm hitting the spot. 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 I am so excited to be hitting the spot from the gorgeous Spark Social Podcast Studio in Atlanta.